One of the things that I'm going to talk about today is how to get people engaged, how to get people involved. It's a process. It's often called occupant engagement, although occupants is just one of the potential stakeholder groups. You heard Jerry Udelson say, changing behavior, that's hard stuff. That's a big issue. And yet, that's the piece of it that I'm going to talk about now is we've got great technologies. How do you get people to use them? Or how do you get people to use them properly? We talked about the dual flush toilets. And if you haven't been trained on dual flush toilets, you know, naturally you may be flushing twice. Believe it or not, I have two very young daughters, 7 years old, 10 years old. They were potty trained on a dual flush toilet. So they're natives. They figured this out from the very earliest stages and knew, there's a way to conserve water. And so for them, it's like automatic. And this kind of goes back a ways for me to my dad, Joe Irvine, who always said to us kids, when you leave the room, turn off the lights. I can still hear his voice. And I was doing that as I was trained to do, and it seems like later in life, in fact, very recently, I ended up hearing another father figure saying, turn off the water. And it was Jerry Brown, who's been saying that to us for some years. Jerry Udelson was talking about how he was working with Jerry Brown in his earlier incarnation as governor. He was trying to get us to think small and save energy, and we're still struggling with it. So it's obviously not something that's going to get solved overnight, but the piece of it that we're going to talk about right now is the behavioral component. The focus I'm taking is that we're all involved in business one way or another. I didn't see anybody that held up their hand for government. We're all involved in business one way or another, and these impacts of water and energy, they're basically risks. And I know we are all in an entrepreneurial atmosphere here, so risk, as Jerry mentioned, represents opportunity. And I'm going to focus on risk for my talk. If we have time at the end, we'll brainstorm a little bit about what opportunities might come out of this as kind of a segue into your afternoon segment. But as I say, I'm more of a communicator than a technical person, and yet that's what feeds into and motivates the resource-using behavior that we've got to change. I think a lot of the technologies are here, but we've got to help people learn how to use them properly. Okay, I knew Jerry was going to show a dry lake bed, so I decided to show you a dry well. Water issues, got them coming out our ears. Energy issues, I'm not picking on the nuclear industry, but I think San Onofre plant, probably a poster child for the uncertainties of energy sources of the future. And I think it's fair to say these represent risks for us, whether we're inventors or entrepreneurs or someone trying to bring a product to market. We may offshore our manufacturing, but water shortages are going to impact our distribution network, our dealers, attracting employees to Orange County or to Southern California. These are very real problems, and of course each risk is an opportunity, but this is what you're wrestling with as business people, and obviously we're going to hear a lot this afternoon about wrestling with it from the point of view of technology. And it's crucial, but it's not enough. There's plenty of technology. Is it being used as it could be to reduce risk substantially? If we could get from point A of this uncertainty to point B where we feel pretty confident we're being very proactive in managing risk, I think we'd feel a lot better waking up in the morning and picking up the morning paper. So Michelle, when you introduced me, mentioned strategic planning. This is something that we help clients inject into their strategic planning. How are sustainability issues going to impact your businesses? You don't have to be a tree hugger anymore to worry about that. California has mandates, as you all know, 2020, zero net energy for homes. 2030, zero net energy for all other buildings. So how do we get there? 2020 is not very far away, and surprisingly, we don't see a lot of people taking steps, making plans, strategizing about what 2020, every new home built is going to be zero net energy. Once we get to 2030, every building you see that's going to be built is going to be zero net energy. So these are issues that we've got to figure out. And it's not just about the building, because again, that's the technology and sometimes the policies. But it's really going to have to depend on the people who plan the building, who offer the policies that govern the building. For example, I was working on a project trying to engage stakeholder groups around an existing building. And we realized it wasn't just about occupants when we started talking about IT. One of the potential behavior changes was, please turn off your computer at the end of the day. Well, that was easy until somebody piped up, well, actually IT does backups at 2 a.m. We can't do that. So immediately we got a barrier we have to deal with. Got to figure out how we're going to deal with it. The basis of what I'm talking about in terms of behavioral change means a lot of two-way communication. It's something called community-based social marketing, and it's very intensive. As Jerry said, it's hard to change behaviors. There's a lot of back and forth. You have to find out what people's issues are before you can figure out how to solve them. So obviously with the IT component, we had to go to policymakers and get them to change their behavior, where they had to say, okay, we're going to do the backups at 11 o'clock, then everything will be powered down automatically, turn it on when you get in the morning. So we couldn't have done that just by focusing on occupants. It's not just the occupants that are going to make that building get to net zero energy operation, which is really tough. We're going to need policymakers involved too. We're going to need the building systems managers involved too. It's a very, again, a holistic, everybody at the table discussion, which means it's intense. I think the good news is that we understand it's not the building that's using energy or water, and you can see it's people using energy in the elevator, or turning on a computer, or doing whatever they do to operate their real estate development firm, or their consulting practice, or their new product development business. It's people using energy. So how many times do they need to hit the on button? And when do they hit the off button? Those are crucial things to figure out, and if we can, modify. One of the biggest areas of building energy use that is connected to people and their behavior is what we call plug loads. Everybody heard of plug loads? Everybody knows what plug loads are, right? Everything that plugs into the wall, plug load. That's the easy way to consider it. Whether it's computers or monitors or printers or copiers or phone chargers. A lot of stuff that we weren't plugging into the wall 20 years ago, we're plugging into the wall now. And researchers are telling us that's just going to continue to climb because there's going to be more and more technology. Maybe it'll be wireless in recharging, but there'll be more loads. So plug loads. Let's take a quick look at plug loads. Again, we're just going to kind of hover over these issues and not dive into them because our time's very limited. Take a look at the red. That's plug loads, and this is the technology of dealing with plug loads. Here's a standard building on the left side. Plug loads, that's almost a quarter. Once you crank the HVAC down, high performance HVAC, not using as much energy, and you crank the lighting down as far as you can, LEDs and occupancy sensors, turning them off, then you get something in the middle, a much higher efficiency design. But look what happens to plug loads. They start to stick out like a sore thumb because suddenly that, as a proportion of the overall energy, has kind of ballooned up to not quite half, but quite a bit. And there's a lot of there's a lot of play in the numbers, so I'm not even quoting the numbers. Some people are saying, if you talk to the people at Lucid Design who make those beautiful dashboards for people to look at their energy use, they say that their empirical evidence shows plug loads are 50% in many of the cases that they've worked on. And that's probably by the time you've got a well-designed building that's very highly efficient. You've still got a lot of human behavior to deal with here. It becomes more obvious. Less obvious in a less efficient building. Some of it's lost in the noise. But what you see is an increasing reliance on technology doesn't get you there. And optimize plug loads here so that it's about a quarter. This isn't behavior. This is technology here. Probably occupancy sensor power strips that when you leave your desk, they shut off. They're usually split. Some of them shut off, some of them don't. You don't want to shut off your computer in the middle of the day. But this is technology optimized plug loads. And what it's showing us is there's still a lot more that can be done in terms of all the things that we plug into the wall in a building. So we need to think in terms of systems, not just focus on HVAC, not just focus on lighting. What about the people? What about their behavior? So there's something that's gaining a lot of currency now in building design and operations called community-based social marketing. It sounds like it has to do with social media. It doesn't really, but social media actually is the best thing that ever happened to social marketing. What it is influencing behavior, and you know what social media do to influence behavior. I've broken it down into 3 steps. Again, there's a lot more to it, but this is a once-over lightly to give you an idea of what the field is like and how it can be used even in your own organization. First thing you want to do is identify the behaviors that are going to work. We often do this through literature reviews, focus groups, surveys. Figure out what you can sell to the people that you're trying to influence. It might be occupants. Tell them to wear a sweater and instead of turning up the heat. That's one possibility, but it's also the building engineers. How do you get them to change what they've been doing for decades? And now there's new systems in place. We need to get their behavior modified as well. So you got to figure out what are the things that are keeping them from doing it, the barriers. Again, focus groups, two-way discussion, figuring out where people's comfort zones are. It's not just traditional marketing, public relations. Put out some publicity, do some advertising, put some banners up on the website. But that doesn't take into consideration the importance of interactivity and feedback. And I think that's, again, the great thing about social media is you find immediately if people are pleased or displeased with what you're trying to get them to do. Benefits, obviously, are a way you're going to sell and promote that set of behaviors. I was working with a focus group, and I gave them about 10 behaviors, and I said, which are the top 3? Which could we implement in this building? So by back and forth with 10 or 15 people, I got a sense that these 3 at the bottom, forget it. They're not going to sell. Impossible. These 3 at the top, these are the ones that work. One of them may not have much impact on the overall reducing the load, plug loads even, but it's saleable and people will get behind it. So it's a way of getting them involved and feeling like they're a part of the campaign. We might go for it. Developing strategies, we're going to talk a little bit about these strategic tools that can be used to engage with stakeholder groups in building operations. But it could also be your drivers. It doesn't have to be a building. So I'm sort of focusing on the built environment because many of us are involved in the built environment, but all of this is transferable. Like any campaign, you need to implement it, you need to evaluate it, you need to figure out what's working, what strategies don't work. It's a continuous process of two-way communications. We talked a little bit about the discussion, the focus groups, the literature research. You have to identify what the hurdles are going to be before you figure out how to clear them. And I think you learn an awful lot about how people are interacting with those buildings. For example, somebody says, oh, green cleaning products, we tried those. We tried those 5 years ago. They don't work. And 5 years ago, they didn't work as well as they do today, so you need to rethink the technologies, rethink the products, rethink some of the new ideas we're going to hear about this afternoon, because those are things that may work better today than your stakeholders thought they did. We mentioned the benefits. Obviously, that's how you're going to sell it. You've got to somehow figure people are going to care. Maybe management cares about meeting corporate initiatives. Maybe you've got a department that you could say, okay, we're going to have, I know one company, real estate firm managing buildings, they would do ice cream socials for the departments that saved the most energy when they had competitions. Competitions sometimes are good. One of the big things, we keep hearing about millennials and millennials. Any millennials in the house here? There's a millennial right in front of me. So everybody wants to recruit you, and once they've got you, they want to retain you, which is what they should be doing, right? I mean, you're precious. And everybody's talking about millennials want to see an organization that cares about sustainability, that cares about the human issues that before business may not have been, it wasn't as high on the to-do list as it is today. So millennials are saying, well, you know, what are the pro bono activities that the company's involved in? Well, that could be a benefit that you talk to your organization about. That we need to do better with our environmental footprint if we're going to keep and recruit top talent, because the folks coming out of college and university now, they want to know what your carbon footprint is. You think I'm kidding, but those things are out on the web and you can look them up. So, as Jerry said, hard work. I gave a shout out to my dad. This is a shout out to my mom, Rosie the Riveter. The look of determination on her face is kind of what you have to inspire. You've got to motivate it. And you can't do it unless you look into what your stakeholder groups want and need. I call these strategies, some people call them tools. I think I use strategies because they really need to be deployed according to your stakeholder groups, whether it, again, be building engineers who have done things for their whole career in a certain way, and now there's new ways of doing things. There's a process called building commissioning that many of you are probably familiar with, where during the construction process in a newly constructed building or a retrofit, there are engineers that are checking to see that those energy-using systems are performing up to the promise that was given to the project owner initially. This building commissioning process is something that, I mean, it started out, they were commissioning ships, but now there's something called Cal Green, the state code, that mandates commissioning for a certain size building. And we got people doing commissioning on every new project that you see going up downtown, whatever the downtown you're in might be. Commissioning is something that, again, you use tools to check a building's environmental footprint. And these tools on the people side are doing something similar. They're trying to maximize environmental performance. My daughters, believe it or not, are singing Put a Ring on It at home. So that's what made me think of this as a sign of commitment. But there's a very interesting couple of studies that show if you do a small ask and get people committed to that small, painless ask, they're more likely to be there when you say, would you do this bigger ask? One example that I know of is a utility wanted people to put a little sticker on their building or in their window saying, we're participating in the power down program or in the energy efficiency program of such and such a utility. It's some small thing. You could get people to do it. What they found was that some number, I'm not a numbers guy, I think it's in the 70s, they said 70% of the people that put that little sticker there were then ready to cooperate when you asked for something bigger. And the bigger ask was, would you let some of our engineers come in and walk through your building and see how you're using energy take a look at some of your meters, take a look at your mechanical room. Amazingly, many people said no, because this is our building, we won't do that. But the people that put the stickers 6 months previous, 70% of them said, yes, come on in. So if you can get people to commit to a program in some small way, that's why I mentioned maybe doing something easy, maybe starting your occupant engagement program with tuning up some existing strategy that you're using, maybe a recycling program that needs to get refreshed. If you can get commitment for something easy, they'll be around when you need to do something a little more challenging. There was a social experiment done in New York City where one person stood on a street corner and stared up at the sky. They put a bunch of researchers on the corner looking up, and they quadrupled the number of people that started looking up too, the social effect. One person doing it, that's not necessarily normal. It may be abnormal. What's wrong with that? But then when a whole group is looking up at the sky, everybody thinks, gee, that's normal to do that. They're all doing it. I think I'll do it. So that's the basis of community-based social marketing. You create a community in a person's mind. In this case, it was a street corner community, but it had an effect. People started looking up because they thought, gee, these people are looking up. I better too. If we think that's what people do, we want to do it. Lake Wobegon. Another classic research project. Towel reuse. You've all been in hotels that ask you in different ways, please reuse the towels. This was Professor Robert Cialdini, Arizona State University professor of psychology and marketing. There's a combination. And they experimented with different ways to approach the ask. Help save the environment, 37%. Partner with us, 44%. When they said, join your fellow citizens, that was the top-rated response. Because suddenly they've created a community in the mind of the people that are in that hotel room. Even though you can't see them, you don't know who they are. And there have been different varieties of this done. One of them even is 75% of the people in this hotel that stayed at this hotel reused their towels. Anybody heard of O-Power? O-Power is a company that works with utilities on these behavior programs. And they did an interesting, I think it was Alex Lasky at O-Power, he did a really interesting experiment. He said, he got people to different messages on their door, trying to get them to save energy. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 messages. You tell me which one was the best one. You can save $54 this month. Pretty good. Money. You can save the planet. Tree hugger approach. You know, there's certain people respond to that. You can be a good citizen. Good citizen. That doesn't quite create a community, but there's some responsibility there. How many think the most effective phrase for saving energy was, you can save $54 this month? That's where I put it. How many think it was, you can save the planet? Not very popular, tree hugging, is it? How about you can be a good citizen? I mean, that's sort of Boy Scout. Boy, you're all on the $54. That's where I was. I thought that's the one. As it turns out, there was no marked difference between any of those. They were all about the same. The phrase that pays is this: your neighbors are doing better than you. And this is going on utility bills now. What's happening in homes of similar size? One of the techniques that's important for social marketing is social diffusion. All you need to know is social media. You know, it used to be word of mouth, and now it's, or a sticker on something or a sign, we participate. But now it's people tweeting about their Prius, or there's something on Instagram about carpooling. All of these things are getting diffused socially very quickly thanks to social media. So social diffusion is easy. The next strategy that's important is prompts, and you've seen those all the time. It's like the towel sign, right? It's point of purchase, if you will, or point of decision. You have to do it right there. Keep calm and switch off. Those are important. Communication is also very important in a socially based behavior change campaign, simply because you got to find out what people's issues are. Well, communication is part of it, but you've got to be consistent and persistent and creative. Free cycle your electronics. Do it in the dark contest. That was for university campaigns at UCLA and elsewhere. Harvard, they say green is the new crimson. This one has a little bit of a creepiness factor, the oops night audit card that pops up on your monitor if you left it on all night. Two-way communication means social media can help a lot. You find out, do people like what they're doing? Are they interested? Are they motivated? Are they going to change their behavior? The other thing that's very familiar to us as energy and water users is incentives. You know, every incentive program has been tried for water, for energy, and they're constantly coming up with new ones and creative ones. And now the solid waste issues with plastic bags. We're looking at, it's in the courts, or we're going to vote on it again in November because there's lots of pushback from the plastic bag industry. But charging for plastic bags, that's a disincentive, which is an incentive. Again, sometimes you have an ice cream party for the department that saved as much energy. One company found that was useful. What's important is the incentives really need to stay in place, because the key to a successful program is persistence of savings. And what's found across the board is when the incentive is removed, participation goes down. Another strategy, convenience. Anybody have one of these gadgets in the shower? It helped me a lot. Just because it was there, I thought, well, I'll try this. And I mean, I admit, at first I'd make it go around twice, but at least I was starting to become, and finally I got to where I could do it in 5 minutes, and still have a ways to go. Obviously, the blue bin under your desk is very different from the blue bin down the hall. The easier you make it, the more convenient you can make it, the easier people are going to do. It's just, you know, it's a natural human barrier. So those are some of the tools for a behavior change program. And obviously, like any other campaign, you need to implement the campaign and evaluate how you did. Has anyone ever participated on a green team where you're helping people stay inspired? Green teams, green champions, the higher up the better, can be very useful. Obviously it can't be just the boss says we have to do this. It's got to be, you know, you see upper management doing a lot of things that they didn't do before, and you tend to want to follow. As you pilot a program like this, you see barriers. People not motivated, what do you need to do? Okay, you go back to that commitment. You have to figure out, get them in the door with something easy. Norms. Let them know that others are doing it. Maybe if you don't have much activity in your own organization, maybe you show small businesses in Southern California, 85% of them have some kind of a green cleaning process in place. Incentives, obviously we like incentives. Forgetting, oh, I forgot to do that. I want to do it, but I always forget. So prompts at the point of decision where you're going to throw that paper. Oh, right, that one goes in the blue one and the can's in the green. And you've got to make it easy with prompts. Lack of social pressure. If nobody else is doing it, I don't feel the need to do it. So you got to establish some norms. It might be on the water bill. Facilities of your size are using this much water in downtown Santa Ana in a month like this month. Structural barriers, that's got to make it simple. Got to make it easy for people to participate. Once you've got a program cooking, a pilot, you can broaden it. And once you broaden it, I think you're going to start feeling like we're influencing behavior, and therefore we're taking a step toward reducing risk. And I mean, this is a crisis. Doesn't matter if you look at, you could look at solid waste, and solid waste is a crisis too. Where are we going to put all this junk? And we've got junk, and we keep cranking out junk every day. If you're starting to do more and more recycling at your place of business, you're seeing that waste stream get smaller. And you hope everybody else is doing that, because we just don't have enough earth to put the solid waste in. We're consuming a lot more than we can throw away. Things are tightening on all sides, and that's why this is a risk that you need to build into your strategic planning, whatever the size of your organization. These strategies can apply to buildings, to facilities, to operations, to personnel programs. And they can apply to a wide range of people. It doesn't matter if you're doing supply chain work with your vendors, or you're trying to bring your workforce into the 21st century, when we've got a lot of systems in place in our organizations, business, government, and otherwise, that they were spawned in the 20th century, and they're out of step with our situation today. If you're able to shrink that risk, that dry well, or that energy source, you're going to feel better. It's going to be something that impacts your daily operations and your daily activities. It started for me with my dad, but the reason I'm doing this stuff now is the next generation. I'm lucky enough to have a 7-year-old and 10-year-old daughter, very late bloomer, and they're the reason that I am out banging on this stuff, jump out of bed in the morning wanting to save the world. And like you and your families, these kids need to inherit a world that's good to live in.